some updates. We have some recommended strategies for you to dive into. But first, to kick us off, I'd like to turn it over to Callie.
Great. Thank you, Marie. Appreciate it. I am happy to be here and so happy to see a great response. We are excited to talk today and share with you many of the recommendations and the data that we've received as we have looked carefully at the Wood County workforce mobility situation. I want to point out, most of you have received emails from me letting you know that we do have the first half of our study materials up on our website. We have an easy website, woodcountyworklink.com, and I'm happy to say that Google has also recognized Wood County WorkLink, so if you need to find it quickly, you should be able to find it in your Google search. This meeting is also going to be recorded, and so we will be making that available as well. And now I'm going to turn it back to Marie, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Callie. And Sam Meldon, we're going to put you on the spot a little bit. Would you like to make a few introductory remarks? Look at him saying, that was unexpected.
Normally shy, kind of hard to come up with something to say. So I appreciate that, Marie. No, I'm just excited. I love that you said it's a hot ticket. I think we're all excited to see what today holds, what the conversation holds. And I just want to thank everyone for being a part of the process. I think there's been a ton of work that's gone into this. It's kind of fun to think about how quickly, on one hand, how quickly time moves is a little scary. On the other hand, when you're making progress, it's actually a lot of fun. So, really excited. Thanks for everyone for being here and dedicating so much time and energy and expertise and engagement to this work. Thank you.
Well, I thank you, Sam. And I just want to note, we have such a great representation here. We have BG, we have Village of North Baltimore, Regional Growth Partnership, Owens Community College. I'm not going to name them all, but TEMACOG, I see my TEMACOG partners, always delighted to see them. We have employers, we have transportation providers. So thank you to all of you for being here today. So Paul is going to bring up on our screen our presentation, and you all know why we're here today. We're very excited to share some updates, including some draft recommendations and strategies. I would ask everybody to put yourself on mute so that we don't hear any of that background noise. And so what's going to happen today is we will go through this agenda, and we're getting through the welcome and introductions right now. And then Nelson Nygaard is going to walk through the proposed recommended transit service strategies. We will get through that section. We'll pause. I will watch for the chat to see if you have any comments or any questions that you would like us to respond to. But then we are going to do a Mentimeter survey. If you scroll back up in the chat, you'll see the link for Mentimeter, but we will also have an opportunity to pause, let you scan a QR code that will take you right to Mentimeter, so you don't have to search the chat box for the Mentimeter. We'll walk you through how to do that. We'll do the Mentimeter, then we'll move on to our next topic, which will be about connection points. How might the services connect to one another? After that, we'll pause again, do some more Mentimeter questions. And when we do those polls, that will lead into a discussion. I'll ask you to raise your hand if you would like to make a comment, or if you'd like to make a comment in the chat box instead, you'll have that opportunity all along throughout this morning session. Then we will get to a transportation demand toolkit. Some of you have attended some conversations related to what we call TDM, but we will go through that in more detail and give you an opportunity to respond to that as well. And then we'll wrap up with next steps. My job is to make sure we get out of here on time at noon, and I promise I will not get in the way of your lunch. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Paul Ludy, who is our project manager from Nelson Nygaard.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Appreciate it. Well, hi, everybody. Good morning. Morning for me. I guess it's still morning for you all. I am Paul Ludy. I'm with Nelson Nygaard. I'm the project manager for WorkLink. And I'm going to walk you through the first part of the slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to a couple of my colleagues. So Sam Wright on our team is going to talk about some of the transit service strategies. And then I'm going to turn it over to Alec Moore. He's with SRF. He's on our team. Is going to talk through the connection points. And then finally, we'll turn it over to Tom Brown, who will walk through our TDM toolkit and some of the TDM strategies that integrate with the transit strategies. So with that, I wanted to give you kind of a quick study update. So as you all know, we started this project back in the spring. We kicked it off. We had a kind of a big tent event at Owens Community College. Since then, we've had a number of meetings, and I'll kind of walk you through some of the things that we've been doing over that time. But essentially, we've been identifying kind of what are the opportunities, what are the needs. We did a needs assessment document. We've done a lot of surveys and interviews with employers. And then basically through that process, we've identified a series of strategies that we're going to present to you today that we think meet some of the needs of primarily focused again on workforce needs. That doesn't always mean it is going to be just for workforce, but it is really the focus of this study. And so here we are it says fall of the transit workshop, technically still is fall, though it feels like winter. And what we will do after this, we'll present sort of the preliminary concepts to you. And we've talked about some of these in some of the earlier meetings, but this is really kind of a refined version of it. And once we do that, we'd like to get your feedback. We'll refine those concepts. And then we'll move into governance and funding options. So we know that some of the questions you may have about some of these strategies is, well, how are you going to pay for them? Who's going to operate them? We appreciate that thought forward, but we kind of wanted to talk about what's the need, what needs are we trying to serve without trying to get too focused on how it's going to get paid for and who's going to operate it. So that will be our next step, and we'll be working hard on that over the next couple of months. We'll come back to just the steering committee for this project, and we'll present some of those draft recommendations and some of the research that we'll be doing related to governance and funding for the different strategies. So that is coming next, and then once we do that, we refine we'll have a memo that we'll be sharing at that point, and then we'll come back and we'll refine the document and kind of package it all up and put it together. So we are about, I would say, 2/3 of the way through the project. We are planning to wrap the project up around March 2026. But we've been busy over the last few months. Many of you, I think, on this call, and I haven't looked through the chat to see exactly who's on the call, but many of you have been involved in many of the events that we've been doing. So thank you for being involved. It's really, really critical to keep this conversation going. So we've had a number of conferences. TARTA had their community update in October. That feels like 3 months ago, but it wasn't. There was the Northwest Ohio Human Resources Association, I believe it is. So they had a conference that representatives from WorkLink attended. We also did a conference presentation for the Ohio Public Transit Association. So all of that kind of helps build the momentum for the project. We also did a focus group. Tom Brown led a focus group on travel demand management. So some of you may have been involved in that. So thank you for your involvement there. We've also done a couple of lunch and learns. So we did one kind of focused more specifically on transit. We did one on van pools from a representative from Enterprise. And so we've been doing a lot of other things in the background. As we've been doing this, we've been developing the strategies. So those strategies have been coming together sort of through this entire process. As Callie mentioned, we also have a number of updates on the website. So we encourage you to go and look at that. Here's the link again. And again, Google is very quick, I guess, because they do recognize it. And so if you just type in Wood County WorkLink, it will show up there pretty quickly. So here are a couple of photos from the TARTA community event. This is a lunch and learn that we did. And so yeah, well, we got a lot more information we can share if you're interested, but and a lot of that is on the website. So I wanted to give you a quick overview of the proposed strategy. So this is kind of a compilation of all of them that we're planning to present to you today. So I wanted to kind of frame this up to say that today, most people, not everybody, but most people drive to reach their jobs in Wood County. And we're not suggesting that everybody is going to take some other kind of transportation service. But we recognize that there are limited options for people to reach workforce jobs, to reach jobs in Wood County without driving. But there are issues with driving, right? Cars break down. That can be a real problem. It can be a real problem for employers in terms of retention. So what this study is really focused on is are those workforce needs. And so what we're going to present to you today is a series of options that introduce new transit services. And so, and we'll talk through those. It also then looks at ways to connect people to these new transit services and some of the existing some transit providers. That includes TARTA, Perrysburg, VG. And then Tom will talk through some of the transportation demand management strategies that kind of tie all of this together. They can be independent. Some people may say carpool or vanpool, but it's really intended to be a complete package and kind of bring everything together, again, to provide options. Not that everybody's going to be using transit or these other kinds of transportation services all the time, but it gives options. And so that's really been the focus of what we have been looking at and what we'll present to you today. So I'm going to walk through the proposed transit strategies, and let me go back here. And so we'll have our 3 sections here. We'll talk about the transit strategies. We'll have a Mentimeter. We'll get a little break so you can put your thinking cap on and give us some input about those strategies. And then we'll talk about connection points. We'll have another break. We'll do TDM, and we'll do another break. So we'll try and keep the meeting moving, so we're not just talking at you the entire time, hopefully. All right, so proposed transit service strategies. We've got kind of 2 main strategies. I'm going to talk through the first one, which is expanding a microtransit service in the northern part of Wood County and some of the policies that relate to improving workforce mobility. So that's really the first piece of the transit strategies. The second piece, Sam is going to talk through, Sam Wright will talk through, sorry, Sam, not you, Sam Melvin. I'm not going to put you on the spot. Sam Wright will talk through the new regional route. So this is connecting Toledo, Perrysburg, Bowling Green, and eventually to North Baltimore and Findlay. So kind of 2-phase regional route. So we'll walk through those. So the microtransit service overview. This is essentially for those of you who maybe attended the Transit Lunch and Learn, or you just know about microtransit, is basically an on-demand shared transportation service. So it is similar to an Uber or a Lyft, but you share, not always, but likely share trips with other folks. And it is done kind of through dynamic ride matching and is an efficient way to serve certain areas. And we felt like WorkLink, the northern part of Wood County, is a really good place to use this kind of service. It's pretty spread out, but you've got really big destinations in different places. So it doesn't necessarily, microtransit is a good service that operate in places where more traditional fixed route service, for example, isn't necessarily most appropriate. So it serves those dispersed locations. And as you'll see, we've got 2 different kinds of service. One that serves those peak-oriented trips, and then another service that serves kind of off-peak services. So we'll talk through those in just a minute. But just in terms of how microtransit works, essentially, it's like an Uber or Lyft where you press to ride. It will dynamically route you from where you're being picked up to where you're going. It'll pick you up. Sometimes you'll go and pick somebody up if it's along the route, and then it will drop you off. Fare structures can be very similar to regular transit services, but that all can be determined as you get into the further planning of the service. So what we're recommending here is that currently the TARTA Flex zone operates in Rossford. And so what we're suggesting is that that zone be expanded. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that TARTA is the operator, but that the zone for microtransit encompass kind of a much larger area of northern Wood County. And the focus here is really on many of the large employers. That's not to say that if there is residential in here or other uses that they can't use it, but the focus of what we're looking at here is really about those big employers. So this does expand the zone. We've got a table here that shows the existing TARTA Flex zone and how much that zone would be expanded. But it also looks at how many more employers are served by expanding the zone to this area, as well as how many more jobs would have access to transit service. I do see that a question in the chat there about the gray area. Yes, this is kind of the expanded zone. We haven't defined that very well. That's why it's kind of fuzzy. So yes, so this is kind of the expanded zone that would need to be further refined as we go through the planning process here. So we wanted to set a couple of policies that support the workforce. So we have designed this, or we're recommending that this be designed to have both peak hour service that provides more direct connection from Lucas County into this zone. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a minute. And then during the midday, or the off-peak times, it would operate similar to the way TARTA Flex operates. So it would be during the middle of the day, but only within that zone. So I'll walk you through that in just a minute. So we've got two different service types here, microtransit during the peak hours and during the off-peak. So during the peak hours, I'm going to flip to this slide. So we would essentially have two different kinds of service. So same kind of service as different periods of time. So the first would be in the early morning, and it would start at about 5 a.m. to about 7 a.m. And this would be a direct connection from the hub in downtown Toledo. So you would have connection to other fixed route services without having to transfer. So we don't have a separate bus that comes down and then have to transfer within this zone. It really is a single seat ride from the hub. Now, if somebody's coming from elsewhere in Lucas County, yes, there would need to be a transfer, but the bus would be there timed to connect to those services at about 4:45 a.m. So it's quite early and earlier than TARTA operates right now. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But essentially, it is a single bus that then would go down and dynamically, as people are requesting rides. Now, they might be able to subscribe to trips, but they would be able to take that single bus and get to their place of employment. It could be residential too, if needed. So there would be a couple of trips. I think we're suggesting here that we think 2 scheduled round trips could happen between this 5 to 7 a.m. period. So, and then basically the same thing would happen in the evening. So you would have between 5 and 7 p.m. This service would, rather than just operating within the zone in northern Wood County, would continue to the hub in downtown Toledo. So very similar kind of service, but the difference here in the early morning and the late afternoon is that it makes that direct connection.
Paul, very quickly,
Yes.
so back on that. So this is one of the proposed strategies. And I'm making that point so everybody knows this is one thing we're going to ask you about later. And then
Yes.
I do want to address, if these peak hours are before TARTA services, how would someone get to the transit hub downtown? And then there's also a question, would this be 7 days a week?
The first question related to TARTA services, what we are recommending here is that TARTA services operate earlier, at least some of the core routes, so that they would get to the hub at about 6 a.m. 5 a.m. I'm sorry, so that then that vehicle can get to many of the jobs. When we did a lot of the research around and talking to larger employers, now it's shift times are kind of all over the place, but we did notice that many shift times start at about 6 a.m. So we're trying to hit that 6 a.m. start time. But there are other opportunities because there are 2 trips to do that. So
And-
yes, TARDA services would need to operate earlier in order to make those connections. And Marie, I'm sorry, remind me of your second question.
It's whether this would be 7 days a week.
Oh, yes, and 7 days a week. And I think I've got another slide here that, well, this is the slide that talks about recommending that some of those that TARDA routes arrive earlier at the hub. So yes, we recognize that that is a barrier to making this work, but we think in terms of getting connections out to Wood County, but also I would say other places in Lucas County, this would benefit both Lucas and Wood County workers.
And then one other question, is this envisioned just for now as one vehicle? Or, obviously everything's dependent on funding, but
yeah,
it talks about 2 trips. So one vehicle being able to pick up people and do this twice. Is that what you mean by this one vehicle could do 2 scheduled round trips?
Yes, that Sam Wright will correct me if that does not sound right, but I believe we had anticipated that a single vehicle would be able to make this trip, and then be able to get back and do it again. So same vehicle within this zone. Is that right, Sam? Or did we say 2?
Yeah. So we said 1 for the 2 round trips in each service period. There would, we could take a look at, if there was demand, very high demand, particularly for like trying to get people before 6 a.m. shift times, or post 6 p.m. shift times. You could look at having 2 vehicles run at the same time, but obviously that's, additional costs assumed for that.
Yeah, so we assumed at least initially, but the nice thing about microtransit is it is flexible. It does allow that flexibility to scale up or scale down. And so initially we thought to test the demand, start with a single vehicle during those periods.
Great, thank you.
That answered the questions that we have coming in? Okay.
Yeah, I think so far.
Okay, so yeah, and I think we have a slide that talks about 7 days a week, but if not, that is, yes, Monday through Sunday. So that was our intention, that the many of the employers that we talked to did run shifts throughout the week. And so we felt like the demand might be a little different on weekends, and that's okay. But we felt like it was important to have it 7 days a week. Okay, so then the off-peak service is slightly different. So at that point, then Route 10 will be operating, and so you have this direct connection. And in fact, it will actually become more frequent in January 2026. So you'll have more frequent connections back into Lucas County. So during the midday, and in a way to conserve resources, we would sort of contract that zone. Well, not contract the zone, but the zone would only operate in Wood County, would not continue to make that direct connection up into the hub in downtown Toledo. So this would be operating just within the zone and making connections then to Route 10. So people would be able to travel within the zone, but also, of course, make connections to Route 10. So we said Hollywood Casino or Meyer. That Hollywood Casino is just one of the locations. We are looking at a number of different connection points to make it comfortable and easy for people to transfer. We don't want the transfer to be something that's difficult and hard for people, because then they're not going to use it unless they absolutely have to. We wanted to make it as seamless as possible. So the connection points, that's just an example to say that it has to happen at the casino. It could happen really anywhere along this route. And it's Alec will talk about some of the connection points that we've been looking at. So essentially, if somebody was traveling from Lucas County during this time, they would take Route 10, get off.
I just got here. I was trying really hard to get here too.
Is there?
Hey, everybody,
Here.
will you put your
And 18.
microphones on mute, please? And I'm looking
Thank
to see
you.
if I can mute it for them.
Okay, no question. All right, I will keep
Okay,
it.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, yeah, people would be able to, if they're coming from Lucas County, they would be able to transfer and take that the microtransit within this zone. So what we are suggesting also is that there'd be like kind of a 30-minute booking window, so similar to TartaFlex, so that people can, within a pretty short period of time, it's an on-demand service, they would be able to book that trip and be able to get their trip within a reasonable amount of time. And then to be able to make that either travel within the zone or make a connection to the Route 10. So this is a kind of a summary. We are suggesting 2 vehicles. This is basically because during the middle of the day, we're suggesting that there be 2 vehicles operating at that time. The service would operate from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. with 2 different variations, as I mentioned, 7 days a week. We don't have any costs yet, but we can estimate what other providers charge per hour or what their costs are per revenue hour of service. So I'll let you kind of do the math, but that gives you a sense of how much services cost per hour. And then these are the total number of service hours for 2 vehicles. So you can do, we didn't want to just calculate it and say, well, this is what it is, because it really does depend on who the operator is. And we have not determined that just yet. We wanted to focus again on the service and make sure that the service is meeting the needs of the workforce in this area. A couple of comments, examples, not comments, examples before I turn it over to Sam to talk about the other piece of this, which is the regional route. There are 2, one example, which is in Michigan that operates kind of 3 zones. And it's not unlike other kind of on-demand zones. There are many of these that are operating throughout the country, but this one really kind of is similar to what we're suggesting. It operates Monday through Sunday. They do have this interesting thing where there's kind of a pre-booked late night service. So this could really be for like shift workers. So that is another option. It could be another layer where you could pre-book that trip so that you know what the demand is. You're not just out there running a bus. And if you get enough folks, then the service could operate. So that I thought was kind of an interesting thing. And similar to what we are suggesting, it would be, trips would be requested on demand using an app. And average wait time for this service they are claiming is about 15 minutes. So I think that's a pretty typical time to wait. We're suggesting, because our zone is probably a little bit bigger, somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes could be reasonable, but you really don't want to go much beyond that, because then it doesn't feel like it's on-demand service. So that we thought was a good example. Another really good example is in the Columbus region, the Coda Great service. It's a free service and it connects to a couple of Coda routes, the 22 and the 24. And its real purpose is to serve an industrial park. So this is very similar to kind of what we're looking at. In terms of operating time, very similar, operating between 5:45 and 9:30 p.m. So again, hitting those shift times. This one is going a little bit later than what we are suggesting, at least initially. That doesn't mean that you couldn't extend this. Again, microtransit is one of those things that is a little bit more flexible, and you can extend hours a little bit easier than you can with fixed route. The other thing that I thought was interesting in terms of this is just how it is operated. It's operated by a city, and it's in partnership with Coda in order to make sure that this service is connecting well to some existing Coda routes. So just a couple of examples that, and there are plenty of others that are out there. We felt like these are more workforce focused, but there are others that are both microtransit and more fixed route service. But we felt like these were good examples to kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam. And is there a question?
Yeah, Paul. So our mathematicians on the phone rounded up 10,000 hours at $150 per hour. That'd be $1.5 million per year, correct?
Your math is probably quicker than me. That sounds right. Yeah. Now, yeah. And now those costs are if you say 150, that's really kind of on the very high end, I would say, for a microtransit service. It can be much more flexible than that, but yeah.
And I will also note Delaware County Transit, DCT, has a similar service in 2 zones now. And, they walked before they ran. They started with one, they kind of tested how the demand was, and then as demand grew, they've been able to grow. But you have to do it based on what funding's available and so on and so forth. So
Right. Yeah, thank you for that, Maria. I think you want to walk before you run. You could pilot this kind of service is an important way to do it. And the other thing we'll talk about in just a minute is that if demand becomes really consistent and if people are consistently using the same locations, the microtransit is also a really good way to test and potentially even transition into a fixed route, which can be more efficient at moving larger amounts of people rather than having smaller vehicles and having to operate multiple vehicles. You could potentially do it with a single larger vehicle. So there are options and there's a lot of flexibility, and that is part of the reason why we're suggesting this as a key strategy. Okay, I think I will move on to Sam. And Sam, I'll let you kind of talk about the regional route concept.
Sure, thanks, Paul. Yeah, so the other transit alternative that we were looking at that we had brought and I had initially talked about in September was this regional route concept where we're linking some of the existing transit services in Wood County, in addition to the Rossford Flex Zone, if it also became sort of an expanded zone like that Paul just went over, connecting these up to Lucas County as well. So we have this regional route concept here, which is a fixed route with limited stops. So it's a little bit more like it has a route that it would take, as a schedule that you could look up to connect it. But it's a little bit different than maybe a lot of the TARDIS services. They're not necessarily a local bus, that's stopping every quarter mile or so. This is really a longer range regional route with closed door service between different points across the county. So really connecting, Bowling Green, Perrysburg, Rossford and Perrysburg Township, and Toledo. So it really tries to bridge that gap, as I said, and would offer a number of trips per day. I just wanted to also note that the Go bus will be providing a new connection. I think it's supposed to be like 2 trips a day, if I'm remember correctly. A little bit more geared towards GoBus's primary, I think, customer base, which is more university students across the state. But that will be a regional connection that exists as well and then the Owens Community College operates a shuttle between their campus and downtown Toledo. So this could work either in tandem or help sort of take that service from Owens if they were if they wanted to help sort of operate that or help with potential funding of this shuttle. So I haven't voted that by them, but it's just more of a different connection point that could be made. It's about 30 miles long. Basically the more important information is that it will be running about every hour and a half is what we have right now. So 1 to 2 hours. Hour and a half for one vehicle to really go from Bowling Green to Toledo and back. It really can do that because it's mostly closed door service. So really it's just at those bus stops that you see in the map there that we would be proposing this route stop. The also would operate sort of across the week, and like the microtransit services, it's needs to sort of have that earlier start time so that you can get people from particularly Bowling Green and Perrysburg if they're looking to get to sort of the major employers along the 795 corridor, making sure that we have that connection early enough for them to be able to start that shift time at 6 a.m. or whenever the shift starts. And same thing in the evening, having it late enough for 7 o'clock. And as I mentioned, the proposed locations, these are not final. These are just what we've proposed based on feedback from that September meeting, as well as just talking with various stakeholders and our internal workshops are having this really stop at the transit hub in downtown Toledo, a proposed stop in the expanded 795 corridor microtransit zone. Initially, we have it as like Owens Community College, but it could be at the Pinta Career Center or another location that, depending on interest in having that service come to them and ease of connections with that microtransit service. And also stop in Perrysburg. Right now, we have it at sort of the Levis Commons area, potentially to help with that connection with the BGSU campus that's in Perrysburg, or at Mercy Health facilities, and then really kind of 1 to 2 stops in Bowling Green, at sort of BGSU, and then sort of a centralized location in Bowling Green as well. So this is, we have some preliminary numbers for this as well. Depending on the vehicle size, it's this the service I think could be something similar to sort of operational cost wise, the cost per hour as the in that sort of $100 to $140 range, depending per revenue hour. This is probably something close because it's only using one vehicle right now as the proposed service. It'd be probably about half the number of hours that are expected for the microtransit zone. And so we, if you remember, if any of you were at the September meetings, we talked about some of the regional connections. I was with you all in that. There was some additional considerations for connections further south, both to North Baltimore and to Findlay. And so we actually have that as our sort of longer term considerations as our second phase. I'm going to talk about that regional one first, but really we have that as sort of a phase 2 of this regional route, having that extension further south. We know there's a strong connection today between Bowling Green and Toledo via Perrysburg, but really need to, we feel like having that additional connection further south is going to be something that is going to take additional resources and really need to be something that's looked at and is just going to require more work, I think, to set up than that initial phase that we have just laid out. And for the microtransit services, though, a longer term strategy is obviously the Route 10 for TARDA already operates, in some of that area, but looking at, how the service is utilized over time, looking at origin destination patterns, looking at when people are needing trips, particularly with major employers. If any major employers, start to shift their start times to help match with what's being provided with with these transportation options, it could, a next step could be looking at how all of these different origin and destinations then connect together to a potential new fixed route service or a modification of existing fixed route services to meet that demand with higher capacity vehicles and things like that, as Paul mentioned earlier. So those are kind of the longer term considerations. We wanted to make sure that we talked about that a little bit as well, just that we haven't forgotten or try to leave out anybody, but just trying to phase that approach. And we want to get some feedback from you all. And I think I'm going to throw it over to Marie to take us through the Menti.
Yes. So you see on the screen in front of you, you can scan this with your phone, or you can type in this link below. And I'm going to give you some time to sign in to menti.com. And then what's going to happen in a minute or two. And Callie, thank you. Just put the link in this chat again. I'm going to ask you questions and see how well you took notes on those strategies. So let's give you 30 more seconds. That's a long time. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. Make sure all ready to go. All right. Oh, look at you jumping ahead. All right. So what's your reaction to the proposed workforce micro transit service during peak hours? So peak hours are kind of those rush hours when most people come or go from work. So far, I'm just going to keep talking a little bit while more people are answering the question. And then I'm going to count down from 5 to let you know, fair warning, when we're going to close this out. So I'm going to count 5, 4, 3, oh, the pressure, 2, 1. All right, so I'm going to keep talking in case there's some late responders, but overall, we've got 12 people saying, yeah, I like it. This is a good strategy. 7 of you, so more than half of you said, it's mostly good, but I have some reservations. And then 1 of you says, oh, come on, this strategy needs work. So if you answered in the strategy's mostly good, but you have some reservations or it needs work, will you raise your hand, please? So use the raise hand function, which is at the top of your screen. Don't let me scare you, but if you please raise your hand if you said you think it needs work or you have some reservations. Okay, I'm seeing some hands go up. Thank you. Okay, there's more than 2 of you that had reservations. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I should see 8 hands. Okay, so of those 7 hands that I see so far, I'm going to give you the option to either unmute and I will call on you, or if you want to just put your reservations in the chat and I will have everybody respond. I am looking, let's see. Bear with me. I'm trying to, who wants to volunteer? Gary, can I call on you? Is it Doran?
Yes.
Can you turn up your volume just a little bit? Oh, you're in a car. God love
Yeah,
you. So what are your reservations or what are your concerns?
my concern is, uh, I mean, if it is workforce development, then yes, we want to do those hours where workforce is. It's, I think, you know, are transit users using it for work, or would it be more used for, you know, doctor's appointments or evening, you know, events? It's, you know, yeah, where like the trend has been for public transit that like weekend service is rising more than weekday service. So it's just that's my concern is are we gearing it towards where the highest ridership would be?
Got it. So, Sam or Paul, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'll go quickly, and Sam, you feel free to chime in. But Gary, that's a good point. I think through how this service is marketed can really help to build support among the workforce or for workers. So that's one way. I don't think we want to necessarily exclude people from using it for other kinds of trips. But you know, one of the things about microtransit, and part of the reason why we're recommending this, at least to start, is that you learn a lot about who's using it and why they're using it, and that can really help to modify that service. So while I think I think a lot of the focus early on could really be about targeting this to workers, and and I think that could really help. People could sort of understand this, and it could even be branded as WorkLink in some way, since the study is really about, workforce mobility. So you could sort of brand it in that way. I'm not saying that you would exclude other people from using it. And I think it's similar to kind of what the service in the Columbus region is. It is intended to be focused on sort of an industrial area. It is intended to be focused on this area that has a lot of jobs. So I don't think we can exclude people. You can't exclude people, but I think we can kind of focus it. So I don't know, Sam, if you have any other thoughts about how to do that, but yeah.
No, I just and I know this was asking specifically about the peak hours, but I think having that midday, still having that midday is one way. And the expansion of the Rossford zone, not necessarily the just moving the zone, helps with that. But yeah, I don't have much else to add.
Yeah.
So a couple quick other comments here. One question is, could we survey workers at the employers to gauge demand and then treat the route like a school bus route? And so what I thinking what you mean by that is to, once you identify the demand, then you would go around and pick people up like you do for school in the morning. And I know we have been working quite a bit with employers, and we have employers represented here. It's always tricky, and I'll defer to my partners here, but it's always tricky to predetermine demand. And it's also tricky that, people want to try it before they make a decision on that. The other reservation, hey, plan looks good, but how are we going to pay for it? It looks expensive. And where does the funding come from? And then another question about what the initial projected ride volumes might look like. So team, do you have any comments related to determining demand before you put the service out there?
Yeah, these kinds of services can really vary in terms of demand. We did not put together any initial ride projections or ridership projections. Now I'm going to go back to the earlier comment related to kind of school bus. Now, you could offer pre-booked trips. So that is another way to enhance and kind of build support for this service. So one of the reservations that people who might be using this service would be is, am I going to get a trip? Is the bus going to be full? Can I count on this? So one way to do that is to kind of pre-book trips, and that then helps you understand and you maximize your resources as much as possible. I will say that most microtransit services, they generate anywhere between, and Sam helped me out here, but anywhere between, say, 3, 4, 5 passengers an hour, which doesn't seem like a lot. But with a service like this that is really focused on workforce and you have these really large employers, those numbers could be higher than that. We really want to maximize, and this is why we're starting out with a single vehicle. You really want to maximize the use of that vehicle. That kind of improves the cost and the cost per trip and maximizes ridership as much as possible. And it's flexible, so that's the other thing. So if you're finding that those buses are often full, then you can sort of add more service. So we're sort of estimating ridership based on the initial service, which is a single vehicle to start. But again, if you're seeing a lot of support, then you can sort of move from there and you can grow the service that way.
Thank you. So I see of those who still have their hands up, if you want to say something, will you leave your hand up? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next topic, the next question. So Jules, John, or Martha, is there something you want to say real quickly or comment on?
I'm happy to come off mute for a second.
Great, thanks, Jules.
So I know that this question is specific about the microtransit, and it came up on the slide that introduced the microtransit, but I'm going to say this comment, but it's going to apply to kind of all of it. Obviously, the Ability Center, our big interest is supporting the disability community. And there's a misconception in a lot of areas outside of the disability community that especially work transportation or work opportunities and employment isn't as important or as much of a priority for the disability community. Actually, we found that the most common trips where people with disabilities are using transit or transportation services is to get to employment. I know on that first slide that showed the microtransit and it showed the little bus that was there, the bus itself didn't look accessible. So I know just our concern, especially on these micro ones, especially during these peak hours, is just making sure that the service itself is physically accessible to people with disabilities so that they can actually, and especially if it's on a set route, the more accessible it is and the faster it is, if someone can enter and get onto the bus in about the same amount of time as someone without a disability, it also means that then that one perhaps wheelchair user isn't slowing down the process and is going to make the bus arrive 2 or 3 minutes late every single time they need to get on or get off or get on or get off one of these different shuttles.
Well, Jules, those are excellent points. Callie, in the microtransit service that TARDA has in Lucas County, is that wheelchair accessible, and those vehicles that you're using for that?
Absolutely. Tarda Move, both Tarda Move and Tarda Flex have accessible vehicles.
Can I
Is that the
just chime in
question?
real quick?
Yes, go ahead,
on
Sam.
this?
Sure,
Thank
It's
you.
a great, Callie's right, and it's a great question, Jules. Thanks for asking. TARDA does not have a vehicle that is not physically accessible. There is not a single vehicle in our fleet that is not fully, accessible from a physical disability standpoint. So that concern, it's a
Well-
really good one, and it's really important to us as well.
Yeah, but it's not a given that TARDA would operate this service, correct, Sam and Callie? So while TARDA has nothing but accessible vehicles, it would be something as you try to ultimately figure out who's going to fund it, who's going to operate it, that be a requirement.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think anytime you think about non-federally funded transit options, I don't need to tell Jules about the stories about, Uber and Lyft and different types of ride sharing. I mean, it gets complicated. I can certainly only speak for our fleet.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, I think our other hands went down, so let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
And those who did have hands up, if you just want to write your comment so that we can take note of it, that would be helpful. All right, what is your reaction to the proposed workforce microtransit for off-peak hours? So the last question was focused on the peak. These are for those off-peak hours. So you think it's a good strategy? Mostly good, but I have some reservations, or do you think the strategy needs work? And we've got about, I don't know, 28 non-project team and TARDA members on here, so we should probably be getting close to 20, 25 responses. Okay, I'm going to give you a few more seconds of thinking time. Okay, I'm going to count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I probably scared you all, but if you are one of those 2 people in column 2, can you let us know why you feel that way? Can you raise your hand so I can call on you, or put your comment in the chat? Okay, you're a bunch of chickens, right? Okay, so let's look at the chat. I see there's a comment there. So, all right, Jules. Okay, similar to your previous comment, you're concerned about someone needing to transfer between vehicles. That means that the drop-off locations also need to be accessible. The last mile issue is a big one for a lot of our customers. Excellent point. And I didn't mean to make fun of you guys and calling you chickens. Bear with me. My crazy sense of humor. So, Jules, do you want to expand on that at all, or just kind of leave it there?
Sure, I can come off mute if you'd like.
Yeah.
Just any time that there is the need to transfer, then if perhaps if there is difficulty or any struggle in getting on or off a vehicle, Then you double it because now there's 2 vehicles that you need to get on or get off. Now you have 2 different staff members or 2 different drivers that need some level of training on disability etiquette and being able to make sure that they provide an adequate service. You have the physical accessibility of the locations themselves to make sure that someone can physically get off of the vehicle and then get to the new position and get onto the new vehicle. And then there's that, if there's any extra time, then again, you have to take that into the schedule, making sure that someone actually has the time to get off a vehicle and get onto the new one. Just similar problems to the first one, but now if you're adding 2 vehicles and transferring, you're potentially doubling the opportunities to run into a barrier for someone.
Yeah, that's Jules, thank you for that. I really appreciate you bringing this up, because this is part of the reason why we're suggesting that early morning trip, again, to hit a lot of those shift times. That is not to say that this could not transition to reduce the number of transfers, so that, even during this midday period, this service could be modified so that it is offering more direct connections, so that anytime you have a transfer, you're right, it increases a barrier, especially for people with disabilities. So that's a really good point. And one of the things that we'll talk about, we have not designed connection points between a fixed route and this microtransit service, but making sure that those connections are as seamless as possible and comfortable and fully accessible. Those are really important things as part of this. So I appreciate that. And then you mentioned first last mile. Part of the reason why we're suggesting a microtransit zone here as opposed to some sort of a fixed route is just the access to and from many of these large employers. While there are some pedestrian infrastructure here, it's pretty limited, and as well as bike infrastructure. And there's a surprising number of people who do bike, believe it or not. It's not a huge number, but any kind of getting to and from, if this was a fixed route bus where you have stops, getting to and from some of the major locations here, we felt like was a big barrier. So that's part of the reason why we're suggesting microtransit, because of not only just for people who might have accessibility issues, but just anybody, I think, connecting to and from those places. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
And before we move on to the next one, I believe we have some employers on this call, and it'll be really important for the employers to also be thinking about how they can be accessible on their end as well. What needs to be done on their property so that it's easy for people to come and go, their employees and so forth. And if we do have employers on here, if you have any comments or you want to ask a question about that, there will be opportunities later as well when we talk about travel demand management and the other options. Okay, let's go to the next question.
I just want to make one final point on Jules' comment. Jules probably knows this, that most of the connection points that currently exist in Wood County are very much unofficial, and usually are maybe a parking lot somewhere. And so that is actually a high priority for this study, is to create better connection points and definitely accessible connection points. So we are actually going to be talking about that next as well.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so now we've laid out the peak hour service, off-peak service. What's your priority? Which one you like the best?
And this is just for the microtransit service. So we're going to ask you a similar question with the same options, but we'll include the regional route. So this is just for the microtransit services. And one point to make here is that, as I mentioned, the flexibility of microtransit. Service we don't have to do it all at once. As Marie said really well, I think we want to walk before we run. And so these things could happen independently of each other. So just keep that in mind. And that's what we want to understand is what are those priorities?
And of course, I'm sure you're thinking, well, if we have early morning service and we can get people to jobs, we're going to need to get them home. So I can understand why our number one is early morning service is top priority, followed by late evening services, and then off-peak as well. But we have a lot of votes for all three, so that's really good to see. All right, let's go to our next.
I want to make a
Question.
comment really quick.
Sure.
You know, we have done our
Sure.
employer surveys, and in that we have found we really have that variety, a lot of 410s a week in Wood County, in Northern Wood County, but also some that start early and end earlier. And so some of those ending times are still in the non-peak hours, if that makes sense. So if you started at 5, you might be ending at 3. So just bringing that up as well.
Yeah.
Excellent point. All right, so what's your reaction to now the proposed regional route? And remember, phase 1 was Toledo, Perrysburg, and BG. So we'll give you a minute or two to digest that.
And just a reminder, as you're thinking about this, you'll see some specific locations here. Again, these are just suggestions. These are not set in stone. So what the concept is really, between each of these sort of zones, we would have a stop or a couple of stops in the case of Bowling Green. So, so don't get too hung up on specific locations. It's really, as Sam said, about kind of more limited stop service between these different areas, providing not necessarily faster than driving, but more competitive with driving between these locations.
All right. Okay. So here I'm going to recap this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did you make it? So a lot of people like the strategy. About 12 of them do. 3 say this strategy is mostly good, but I have some reservations. And I know at least 1 or 2 of you have reservations about funding. And I'm looking to see. All right. I'm going to keep us moving on to the next question now. All right. So what's your reaction to phase 2 of the proposed regional route? So assuming that we get some traction with the first phase, do you like the idea of the description of the phase 2, which would continue on to North Baltimore and Findlay? Okay, we're hearing so far, I like it. Somebody has reservations. Thank you, Michael. Michael's consistently concerned about funding, but I know you're not alone, Michael. All right. Okay, a lot of support for this strategy too. So I think in a nutshell, it seems like you think we're on the right track. The devil's in the details, right? Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Marie, before we do that, there was a comment in the chat. If there's a potential stop at Owens, why not add one in Northwood? I believe there are several locations along Oregon Road that could be utilized. A lot of our largest employers are located in this area. That's a really good comment. We did want to be open to the number of, where these services would connect. So if you hold this, we do have the opportunity we'll walk you through some of the connection points we looked at, and I'd like you to add that to that comment. So yeah, we're definitely open to looking at other locations, and so thank you for letting us know about that.
I also just want to comment that we are very aware of the Northwood businesses. A lot of them fit the profile of what we're looking to serve. So just so they know.
Right. Yeah, and definitely the microtransit service would serve Northwood. That is one of the main reasons why we wanted to kind of show that boundary as being fuzzy. We don't exactly know where that boundary is going to be, but like as Callie said, many of the large employers in Northwood and other parts of Northern Wood County, that's kind of the main focus of the microtransit service.
Sorry, just one more point. The other part and why the regional part doesn't have to be in tandem with the microtransit piece, but it really helps to be in tandem with that microtransit piece, particularly in the 795 corridor and in Northwood and other areas, because there's just a really there aren't a lot of pedestrian safe areas for pedestrians to get on and off sort of vehicles, and having more fixed routes stop locations would require more of those connection points, but also infrastructure to get people to and from those job locations that microtransit is more easily able to go essentially directly to the front door of those businesses to drop people off in a safe location that's off street. So that is a consideration that we're thinking about. It doesn't mean that we can't do it in the future, but it is something that we're just trying to, with the conditions today, that we're trying to take a look at.
Great. And bear with me, I'm going to push us a little faster through a few more questions so that we can get to the next segment. So, do you agree or disagree with the following statements? The proposed service hours allow shift workers to reach their job locations on time. And let me just qualify, if you may or may not have an opinion on these, or you may or may not know, but if you do have thoughts on it, please share. The second comment, the proposed strategies will connect to most of the key employers in Wood County. Do you agree or disagree? The proposed microtransit strategy addresses the needs of workers in northern Wood County, and the proposed regional route addresses the needs of workers throughout Wood County. All right, so I think you're still entering your thoughts here, agree or disagree. So the strongly disagree is on the far left side, strongly agree is on the far right side. While you're entering, I'm just going to look and make sure I haven't missed another comment. All right, let's give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I think there is overall agreement, maybe some room for, let's see more details before we move into a strongly agree. And let's go to the next question. So now each one of these has just a little bit nuance difference between these questions. So now, how would you prioritize all of these? Which one would you want first, second, third, fourth? So the microtransit early morning service, okay, the regional route, the late evening service, or off-peak service. So a lot of you're entering as we go. Okay, I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, still a couple little changes in there. So that microtransit early morning service appears to be the winner. And we have, just so you know, 16 of 31 of you voted. So kind of half the crowd is actively participating here. Microtransit late evening service comes in second, followed by the regional route, and then the off-peak service. So I think everybody recognizes nobody has a blank checkbook, right? So this is what you would do if you were choosing your priorities today. All right, I think we have next question. All right. Here's your chance to weigh in with comments or suggestions. If you have any, type them in and we'll see them appear here. Okay, you guys are still thinking. All right, I'll tell you what, let's save this one for you to put your comments or ideas in the chat, because this one may take you a little longer to process. And I think this might be the end. Oh, here we go. Does the TARTA hub have enough space to handle additional routes? Callie or a representative from TARTA? Can you answer?
Are we talking about, so the quick answer is yes. We have just accommodated both Go Bus and the Owens Community College shuttle. They have their own space outside the hub, a little bit down from where all the other buses are, certainly walking distance for everybody, but all on the same block. We're only talking about one vehicle here. This isn't a big lift for TARDA.
All right, thank you, Callie. The next comment is keeping it as flexible as possible for people with unpredictable schedules and unreliable transportation to the transit hub. Okay, that's a great comment and suggestion. All right, let's move on to the next one because I want to get to the connection points.
I think this is the last one before we move into the next.
Perfect.
We'll go back to start talking at you again here. So I'm going to turn it over to Alec Moore, who's going to walk through some of the work that we've done on connection points. And Alec, turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate everyone's time this morning. I'm going to jump through these slides a little bit quickly because I know time is precious at this point. But as Paul mentioned earlier, while the project is certainly looking at service delivery strategies, and Paul and Sam walked you through some of those elements, an equally important component, it relates to where people can access and connect with transit services in Wood County. Now, you all certainly understand better than I do that Wood County is a sizable geography with a range of different land uses, from certain locations that are very urban and others that are suburban to locations that are transitioning and still very rural. So that kind of range of geographic and landscape characteristics, they present both challenges and opportunities, though, when we consider not only where service may operate in the future, but the level and intensity of a connection point investment. So as a project team, we identified 12 locations that were included on our evaluation. Those are shown on the map here that you're seeing. From north to south, generally speaking, we identified locations like the Hollywood Casino, where there's a stop currently, Owens Community College, Levis Commons, of course, that's already come up a few times now, and then on the way down to Bowling Green and BGSU. The connection points themselves, we're actually preparing a memo on this right now that I'll be sharing and sending to Paul here soon. But connection points themselves, they come in all sort of shapes and sizes. Ideally, there would be a common design for these kinds of connection points. But for example, in more urbanized locations where service might come a little more frequently, or there might be some additional connections with other TARDA services or other regional type services, we commonly see connection points that might be a little bit larger in their overall size and have a few more passenger amenities that come with them. While at maybe more rural locations, the footprint of a connection point may be a little bit smaller or more modest. Again, reflective of demand, also time of day. We want to keep that cognizant. I've seen a number of comments already about service later in the evening, so that obviously means lighting, some of those other kind of passenger comforts that would come with using this kind or employing this kind of strategy for a connection point. And I do want to note that, again, this is a fairly wide range of locations that we've been looking at. But I think it's important to note that all of the connection points that we're showing on the map here have merit and would add value to the overall connection and system connectivity if they were implemented. We know that resources, though, are not unlimited. So we are naturally tasked with identifying where might we start with some of these initial locations as far as, a priority location? What might be some locations that we want to look at next or kind of keep in mind for the future? And then also, lastly, I would say some locations that kind of warrant consideration and keeping an eye on, but comparatively as compared to, certain locations, they're not quite ready for an investment, at least at this time, beyond perhaps what they might have today. So why don't we go to the next slide? Thank you, Paul. So this slide helps show the criteria that we have been applying as part of this evaluation. We identified 16 different criteria that seek to examine elements of population and employment characteristics as shown for each candidate's connection site or connection point. We try to also factor in current and future land use conditions, economic development potential, education locations, commercial nodes, and so forth. So we tried to kind of look, again, kind of toss a net far and wide, looking at a variety of different criteria that can contribute to the analysis. And I want to emphasize that we actually did not weight any of the criteria over, one over the other or so forth. We did assign a point value in order to help make some of our initial determinations that we'll be showing in the coming slides. So we did apply, again, we had to have a way of kind of distinguishing what we saw as the kind of the cream of the crop of this group, and what were, again, some that we might want to keep in mind for the future, but as we relate to trying to distinguish these points from one another. So for example, on our scale, and this will be talked about in our memo, for locations that scored with 36 points or above, those were identified as priority connection points. And then for locations that were scored from between 24 and 36 points, those were sort of the secondary connection points, locations that we most want to consider kind of, subsequently to the priority locations. And then anything scoring below 24 points, those would be those kinds of locations where we might monitor, for example, an intersection or a location for the future, but it needs a little bit more time to bake, whether it's on a land use basis and economic development, lens and so forth. I'll just quickly I'm getting a little technical on the points, but the way we determined this was basically in quartiles. So if a location, again, if a high score was 3 points, for example, across 16 criteria, that would equal 48 points. So when we talk about, a location being a priority location, at being above 36, that's that top 25th kind of percentile or quartile, and how we scored that. And that'll all be described in the memo that we produce on this. Why don't we go to the next slide, though? Okay, so as shown on this slide, there are roughly 5 to 6 locations that stood out as good candidates we see for initial consideration as a connection point. As Sam's remarks noted earlier, as far as these locations, generally speaking, mirror the regional route concepts, but they would also certainly work with the microtransit service concept that Paul was discussing, and certainly within the 3 transit zones that were shown on some of the earlier maps. Connection points that certainly stood out to us include Levis Commons, the Meyer in Rossford, downtown Bowling Green, as well as the Rossford Library and the Career Center as a couple of the key signature locations that stood out. And again, I want to emphasize that all of these locations do have merit, and they certainly still could be considered. This is just sort of those initial locations that stood out in the analysis to us that probably are the areas we want to focus on first, and then and apply resources to first, and from there we would sort of work our way down the list as far as other locations to add in the future. So yeah, next slide. Thank you, Paul. So I think this is probably the last slide on this subject. We've moved through it a little bit quickly, but you see here kind of what the distribution of these sites sort of look like. So, as we transition from that table slide to this one, showing this on the map, what we see is a kind of a good geographic spread of potential connection points across Wood County. While there are many contributing factors to the success of a transit system, one of the factors that is most commonly looked at is trip expediency, keeping travel times down for passengers. So another nice aspect of these connection points that already were standing out to us in the analysis is that we see a distribution of connection points initially recommended, in terms of geographic dispersion that would help keep travel times down, keep passengers moving, and, also connecting up and offering opportunities to expand the footprint of transit laterally within Wood County and some of the other geographies as well. So I think that is my last slide, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Thank you, Alec.
Yep.
Yes, and I will move into a related topic. Thank you for talking at the high level as we start to kind of drill in. And Callie just put a really good comment in here, specific to Northwood, but I think is really relevant for all of Wood County, is about safety, suitability, feasibility of people getting around, whether that's via transit or walking and biking. So one of the things that we wanted to include in this study was just an emphasis on kind of filling in some of the gaps in the walking network. And we recognize that there are gaps. It's not a complete network right now. But we can't do it all. So one of the things that we are going to suggest as part of this is kind of filling in those gaps, especially at the connection points, as Alec was talking about, at major destinations, at some of the major employment locations, to make sure that that things are easy to get to for everybody. They are accessible. And so I think that's a really important part of what we wanted to focus on as part of this study. So we just had a few examples of, some places where we would actually kind of fill in some of those gaps. This is just an example from the south part of Rossford and the Rossford Mire, where you may or may not be able to see, but there are some sidewalks, but it's an incomplete network. And so as we start to look at those connection points, one of the things we want to emphasize is to start to add in sidewalks to make it as comfortable and as accessible as possible for people. Not just sidewalks, but also crossings across major roadways. So being able to look at where signals are located and trying to align those with where people can safely cross some of these major destinations, but kind of filling in the network. Again, we know we can't do it all, but starting with those connection points, looking at places where we can make it a little bit more accessible and easy for people to get around. This is another example where just panning a little bit further south, this is on Fremont Pike, where you do have a sidewalk, but it doesn't fully connect. And so, and I know that this area is still growing and changing. There's a lot of new development happening. And as that happens, these sidewalks are probably maybe even from when this picture was taken, this could have already been improved. But this is an example of where we want to make sure that these connections continue to be made, especially where we may have people using transit. We did want to call it an example. This is from the Cleveland area, and where the transit service didn't go into this large retail area, but did make an accommodation, or at least the developer made accommodations for people coming in from the street and for using transit. And so you can see this is just an example. I've seen others where you actually have covered walkways going through parking lots. These should be wide enough for people in mobility devices so that these stops, if the bus is coming out here and stopping on a major street, for example, that there still is a safe way to get through and navigate through some of these large areas. So we wanted to call that out as an example. So just a couple of things that we're thinking about, and Jules, you kind of mentioned kind of first, last mile. I think that's a really important thing to think about, for not just for people with accessibility challenges, but also for everybody. I think it's that first, last mile. And as Callie mentioned, there are some places where it's just not accessible. There just is very, very challenging environment for people to use transit and to walk and or bike. So we wanted to just call out, especially around those connection points, that those connections are really important. So we're going to go back to Mentimeter and ask you some questions. Oh, go ahead.
And before we do that, and actually you could go to the first question, but I want to, or the next question, question 9. I do want to respond to some of these comments in the chat. A lot of great conversation going on here. So before I get to the ODOT comment that Callie actually already answered, Gary wants to know others' opinion about downtown Bowling Green as a connection point, because let me read this. Downtown BG is a good connection point, but its selected location could be critical because downtown BG is fairly congested due to single lanes and so forth. So any comment on that? That might be
Marie,
a
I
Callie.
had muted. I would just say, I don't want the bus stopping in front of Mr. Spots because I like to park there and get in and get my sandwich, and it's right on the corner. And I think you're going to make a lot of angry people if you put a bus stop, or the breakfast diner that's now closed. It's a great place to have a bus stop. You just got to be very careful about where it actually ends up.
Gotcha. We'll just take that point and make a note on that. And then there was some.
This is Martha from Bowling Green.
Yeah.
We just finished and do not have, council is actually getting the final report on December 15th at a meeting of the whole. Just finished a bike ped study of Main Street, which may inform where you might even think about putting a stop.
Great.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Did somebody else want to make a comment on that? All right. The other comment was, first of all, appreciation for making filling sidewalk gaps a priority. And Gary Thompson noted local zoning also applies, usually as empty lots are developed and the code requires sidewalks. And the other comment, is ODOT a candidate potentially as a funding source for some of these sidewalks? And they do have funding for safety improvements for bike ped and roadways. Now you got to compete for it and so forth. But I think your district, ODOT district, has a great relationship with TARTA. Callie or Sam, do you want to comment on your relationship with ODOT?
I can. I know that that's not what Ed's question was. So I want to address that really quick. But yes, we meet relatively frequently with Chris Waterfield in BG, actually at the District 2 office. He is our lead for safety, and he has his eyes all over Wood County for safety improvements. So there is money there, and it's honestly just needs to be asked for and step through their process. So that is one of the most fertile paths forward. But I think what Ed was really asking about is, are we as a study aware of some of the upcoming big changes that ODOT is expecting in this area? And the answer is yes. We know about the system redesign, or that there's a couple interchange redesigns. Big ones that are happening is particularly on Fremont Pike by all of the stores there in Perrysburg and Rossford boundary. That's going to become a diverging diamond. And so we did not mark that as a potential connection point, you might have noticed, because actually the diverging diamond doesn't flow through. It redirects people one direction or the other. And so it makes it less of a good connection point. There's another interchange, I believe, going in at, oh goodness, what's it called? Sorry, a 5 Point Road. That's going to change the accessibility around 75. These are major changes for Wood County, and we are aware of them.
Yeah, and I think
Great.
just to add to that, I think having a plan for, as Alec was mentioning, kind of those priority connection points and being ready for when those projects do happen, and to say that, be thinking about transit, be thinking about people coming to this area if this road is being rebuilt or whatever, to be thinking about accessibility, sidewalks, and bike access. So
Yeah,
having a plan for that is important.
And I know we have a lot of municipalities on the line in TMACOG. And so continuing to think about those policies and prioritizing, making sure that all users are being considered. So of the priority connection points, here was the question, how would you prioritize them for future implementation? So it looks like, have people responded? Is that what these colors are, or have they not
No,
responded
no, these
yet?
are just These are our initial, this was our initial evaluation of the connection points that we looked at. And so what we're kind of asking folks to do here is to say, do you agree with this, this
Looks like
evaluation?
we're
Do you
missing
think some of these
Penta
are more
on here. I just noticed, sorry.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Shoot.
no. Sorry, Penta. That was just an oversight, not on purpose.
Not on purpose. Apologies for that. Yes.
Oh, here we go. Now we've got some responses.
If you feel like Penta should be at the top of the list, or kind of where you feel like they should go in this list, please let us know. We can, if you put that in the chat. Apologies for that oversight.
Well, and the next question is going to be, are there connection points we missed? So there you go. All right, so let's see what our response is. Owens is at the top, followed by BGSU. Rossford Meyer comes in next, the library, followed by Levi's Commons, Downtown Bowling Green, and then Buck Road, Glenwood. Oh, BG and Owens just flipped. All right. Great snapshot. I'm going to count down before we move on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we'll lock it in here. Now, just so you know, we're just getting an order of magnitude. This is not a vote. It doesn't mean that after what we have 15 people responding, after we review the findings and so forth, this just informs our thinking. It doesn't mean that, oh, well, Owens County got more votes than the Rossford Library, and therefore we don't do the Rossford Library. That's not how this works. It's just kind of getting a sense of where you think we're on the right track.
Yeah.
All right. So
Okay.
next slide is where you get to add those connection points that you think we missed. So Penta is number 1. Okay, are you guys typing in your responses? All right, thank you for the person who wrote in Penta. Okay, for solar, Wales and Oregon, Wales and Arbor, Northwood. Paul, do you have any reflections on what you're seeing here?
I'm wondering if they're specific to Northwood. Is there is there a good specific location that you think we could look at? Oh, I see here that the hockey arena. No, that's in BG. Is there a specific location in Northwood you think we should evaluate?
Okay, if you think of that, let's we'll have you put it in the chat or put it here, but we want to move on to Tom to talk about travel demand management.
Bob Evan in Northwood. Okay. Thank you for that. 2 gas stations and 2 in the other corner. Okay. We will take a look at that area. Thank you. Okay. Back to the PowerPoint slides. And with that, we will turn it over to Tom Brown, who's going to talk through the TDM toolkit.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Marie. Yeah, so as part of our work, we wanted to develop a TDM toolkit for Wood County. So I'm going to go over that, but starting, taking a few steps back and introducing and defining the concept of TDM, how it improves workplace access, and a quick overview of existing Wood County resources that we noted before we started assembling a toolkit of expanded options. So what is TDM? Essentially, it's a suite of strategies to improve non-drive alone access to jobs, services, and community connection. Obviously, with this study, where our focus is on jobs, so that it can do a lot more. It focuses on access to available transportation options, therefore getting the most out of those existing services, infrastructure, investments, et cetera. So that would include anything that comes out of this study that gets improved to expand transit services in Wood County. And in this way, transportation demand management is really a complement to transit, thereby reducing dependence on personal vehicles for workplace access. Next slide. So again, bigger picture, step back, and for the audience, I'm from Lucas County. My brothers grew up in Wood County, so I'm very familiar with this region. And this is true of many regions across the country, but for several decades, housing and employment centers have decentralized. We've heard a lot of talk about the downtown Toledo transit hub. That's the best place to get access to the most transit services. But for several decades beyond my lifetime, jobs and housing opportunities have moved outward from that center, which complicates the transportation network across the region, particularly for transit. For one thing, it directly expands and extends the trips between homes and jobs. But it also, more and more of those trips just don't align with the hub and spoke system of most transit systems, including TARDAs. And that extends the passenger travel time for those who are dependent on transit, that if they have to go into downtown Toledo and then back out, that also puts a great burden on transit operators to meet those needs so that people can access jobs. And again, not unique to TARDA, but certainly the case here. Next slide. So for most, this challenge is addressed by getting a car. Again, I grew up in Lucas County. That was a big part of getting your first job, getting a car. But that's not an option for many for various reasons. It's also a costly option for all. And this results in, again, not unique to Wood County, but we see this more and more across the country, periodic workplace access disruptions and insecure employment that affects employees, but also employers in Wood County. You get a great hire, they're doing well, but their car ends up in the shop for a week. They have no other option, and you don't see that employee again. You lose that employee goes back to struggling to find the next job. So TDM can help those who do not drive or face these kinds of securing a personal vehicle that's reliable challenges by providing and promoting Plan B and Plan C options that make transit more viable as Plan A. So yes, I'm going to rely on transit, including maybe this new expanded service, because I know I have a backup for that day I missed my connection or my schedule changes and that just doesn't work. I know carpooling is an option. Next slide. So looking at existing resources before we began this study available to Wood County, this is a statewide resource. Actually, ODOT provided this about 10 years ago, initiated this program called Go Ohio. This is maintained in Wood County by TMACOG, provides a wealth of information on available travel modes and programs, as well as some competitions and rewards to incentivize those who do occasionally or regularly use alternative modes of transportation. Next slide. A couple of examples of the resources that are available through this platform: free ride matching. So I can, if I'm new to Wood County or I'm looking at a Wood County job, I can plug in where that employer location is, plug in what my interest in carpooling is, my schedule, etc. And next slide. I can even, if my employer is registered with GoHio, I can look for rideshare matches, whether that's a van pool or a carpool partner, just among those who work for. So if I work for Solar or Meyer, I can look for carpool partners that work where I do, which can increase the confidence that this is a mode that will work for folks. And then beyond that, you can explore other alternatives. Next slide. By going to the Ohio platform and entering again, what is your commute? What types of commutes are you interested in? And the service will provide you information about biking, carpooling, taking transit, etc. Next slide. So building upon this, incorporating this into a toolkit and then expanding that, bringing in some national best practices that are a good fit for Wood County and hopefully not, we hear a lot about funding. There are a lot of great opportunities that do take significant funding. We have included some of those in the toolkit, but really try to emphasize strategies that could be added to the toolkit that don't bring those cost challenges. Next slide. So go through these fairly quickly. Obviously, the focus of this study, I won't belabor this, but the first place to start is more and better transit. That is a great TDM strategy. And so that is the focus of this study. That will become part of a better tool within this toolkit. Next slide. Beyond that, and this has been touched upon by a few folks today, but transit stop improvements, making a better stop that works better, that is more comfortable, that is safer, that is attractive, provides information, and sort of elevates the transit rider experience so that it doesn't feel like I can't wait to get a car because this is miserable. Next slide. Yeah, just highlighting a national case study in this space. The Go Triangle transit provider for the Raleigh-Durham area initiated a transit stop improvement program with the city of Durham to meet the city standards for accessibility, shelters, seating, et cetera. And this is supported through local funding that the city has identified several funding streams for. A picture here is of an example. On their website, they list all the different locations where they've funded transit stops over the years. Next slide. Another great strategy for any TDM toolkit is this transit cost savings programs. And the first place to start is you can set up payroll systems so that if I take transit regularly, I'm paying TARDA every month for a month pass. I can pay for that through pre-tax income if my employer sets that up. It saves me money. It also actually saves my employer money because that money comes out of their payroll tax liability, that money that I funnel into regular purchases of transit fare. Next slide. The RTA in Cleveland is a good Ohio case study of this. They work with local employers to help them set this up. Again, removing those barriers to something that brings benefits to both the employer and employee. And I know Callie, through this study, I know that Callie and Tarda has worked to set up a lot of that program. There are a few missing pieces, and hopefully that becomes a case study in the Wood County and Lucas County area soon. Next slide. Carpool and van pool support. I mentioned that the GoHio platform does one of the critical points of support, which is helping people find matches. That's almost always the first barrier people bring up. I'd love to save money on gas. I would love to save wear and tear on my car, but where am I going to find a car share partner? These online platforms are really brilliant for that. And that's, again, a free service already available today. And if there are van pools existing in the area where you work or your employer provides those, that is another thing that you can find information on at that GoHio platform. Next slide. And again, in Lucas County, case study in the region, TARDA does have a van pool program where it pays half of the lease costs for vans provided at an employer, with the remaining costs either covered by the van pool participants or their employers in some cases. Next slide. Bike access improvements. So improving access to Wood County jobs via bicycle. As Paul mentioned, this is often a hidden mode that we don't notice, but I can say where my parents live, there's a big agricultural plant that was developed about 3 years ago. I see more and more people biking on pretty intense roadways. So ways to improve this include improving roadways, providing bike parking at work, providing bike share if you're in an employment cluster. This is another great first mile, last mile solution to get people to the front door of their workplace. And bike safety programs so that increase the confidence of people that are interested in biking, but maybe haven't ridden a bike since they were 12 and could use a refresher course. Next slide. And just highlighting this as a best practice, looking through design manuals, there are examples of things like paved shoulders that work with the kinds of roadways you see everywhere in Wood County. It is expensive, but there are often programs that can fund these types of improvements that extend the existing or close the gaps within existing bike networks and can provide important links to jobs within Wood County. So by simply making that shoulder that already exists a little wider, a little more level, a little better drained, and therefore a safe passage for cyclists. Next slide. Pedestrian access improvements. I think this is actually where Paul had a nice segue into the TDM toolkit. Just again, and I'm stealing his picture here. This is a great example of, there's a bus stop, there's an employer, but the immediate environment around the bus stop or along the connecting path from the bus stop to the front door of the workplace is unsafe, uncomfortable, intimidating, etc. So spot targeted improvements where you see issues can really help make it's a pedestrian improvement, but it essentially makes transit a more viable option for those going to that workplace. Next slide. National case study, and I think someone actually mentioned earlier, sorry for forgetting who, might have been Callie, but in Pierce County, Pierce Transit in Tacoma, Washington, the transit agency is actually brought in at the development approval stage so that they can identify, as was mentioned in the chat about Northwood, there are some site issues for accessing via bus. And so identifying those before those sites are developed so that you can make sure that the sites and including getting to the front door of the workplace are accessible. It's a great opportunity to bring in the transit folks who would know best how to spot issues that could be mitigated. Next slide. Promoting transportation options. So we're shifting into, okay, we know we have this suite of options, these different modes, these different improvements that we've made. Let's get the word out. So this is an example of a video that TARTA has developed and promotes that walks folks through how to pay for their fare on their phone. Again, it's a service that TARTA has invested in. You get the most out of that investment by letting people know about it, and everybody is hoping there's a video that shows them how to do it. No one wants to read a manual anymore. So this is just another example of part of a toolkit of how do we get the word out so people know about these things and have confidence in trying them out. Next slide. And circling back to existing resources, the GLCAP is in this space of promoting these options and letting people know how to get around in Wood County via transit. So this is a great resource that we can build upon. Next slide. And again, the GoHio platform, which TMACOG is investing in sort of the next phase of this. So this is perfect timing for developing a TDM toolkit where there is this landing clearinghouse resource of information for any new transit service that comes out of this study, but also any implementation of these things within the TDM toolkit. There is one place where employers can direct new employees to go to find out what their options are. Next slide. And then one other sort of umbrella strategy that we wanted to highlight is guaranteed ride home. So again, having these conversations, okay, transit works great. I feel more confident about it because if my shift schedules changes, maybe I can try carpooling, or I can bike when it's nice. There's a new paved shoulder on the highway, but I'm not doing it in December, January, February. But now there's a new microtransit service that works for me. What happens if I need to get home to my kid and I can't get there fast enough on a bike, and transit doesn't work during the middle of the day? Guaranteed Ride Home provides a handful of reimbursements for taking a cab, Uber or Lyft, any type of ride service. 4 or 5 times a year is typical to meet those needs, again, to provide an additional level of assurance that relying on non-driving options, it takes some of the risks away from that. Next slide. And just highlighting again an Ohio case study. MORPC, which is the Temacog Pier in the Columbus region, provides a version of this. And I think I have that last bullet on the wrong, well, kind of the wrong slide, but just wanted to call out A-Ride, who I think is on the call, is a new service in the Wood County area that could be another service that you take and get reimbursed for via this type of program. And then just turning toward implementation, again, the focus on this is to put out ideas that you may not be able to implement next year or in 5 years, but maybe a bit more aspirational. But a lot of these already existing could be improved, and many others are fairly low cost. And again, at this time where there is this synergy around thinking about this workplace access via transit and TDM, this is a great time to move these things forward. So next slide. We did have a working group to brainstorm, okay, what is the implementation status of each of these elements of the toolkit? What are the critical needs to move them forward? Who would be the lead for that? Who are the critical champions to help make that happen? And really starting to identify funding sources. So we'll be completing this sort of implementation matrix as part of the toolkit. And I think that just continues on the next slide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. And we have 2 quick questions for you on the Mentimeter. So I think you're probably all signed in by now. So let's go to that first question, which is actually question 11. Pass the connection points. Here we go. So which of the priority strategies that Tom talked about do you think will have the greatest impact? So that pre-tax transit purchase assistance, encouraging carpool and vanpool programs, just promoting and educating people about transportation options, and potentially using a commute information and planning platform like Go Ohio. Actually, it does exist, so it's a matter of promoting it. So
And
Roger,
I talked through those table slides quickly because I know we're running out of time, but these are the 5 of the toolkit elements that we identified as real priorities for implementation, a combination of their impactfulness and also not having significant barriers to implementation. So that's why these 5 were selected. Thanks, Marie.
thank you, Tom. And, I think all of us on here have talked quite a bit about filling the gaps on sidewalks and bike ped safety and, last mile. So it's not to minimize those at all, but those are, you got to get into the programming and funding cycle for those, where these are some things that you could move on pretty quickly. All right, I'm going to count down from 3, 2, 1. All right, I think there's consensus here. We need to do more education. We need to promote these transportation options that are already out there, really promote the Go Ohio program and the pre-tax transit purchase assistance. I think there's a lot of people who are unaware of these programs and how they could be used at employers. So that's another educational item. And then promoting van pools and carpools. Okay, I'm going to jump real quickly to the next list. Are there other strategies we should consider for enhancing workforce mobility? While you think about that, earlier it may have been Callie or Paul that said the start and ending times for various employers were kind of all over the place. And in some respects, that can be a good thing. I'm just going to comment that in the Washington State area, the Puget Sound area, I had some stomping grounds there for a while. I loved seeing the Pierce Transit example because I was there when they started to create that program about being at the table early on during development. But another program was to work with the major employers and stagger shift times so that they weren't clogging I-5 at the same time. So, it depends on the circumstances of your region, but in their case, their traffic congestion was so terrible. That was one way to unclog things. Actually, what it did was it it stretched traffic congestion out throughout the whole day instead of just those peak hours. All right, a regional trail system in Wood County are you guys already working on that in Wood County? Right. How about a reliable mechanic shop certified not to rip people off who need their one and only car fixed? Well, there you go. Got to bring everybody on board, right? Everyone's part of the solution. And then another vote for connecting the regional trail systems. So I'm going to ask Paul to take us back to the final 1 or 2 slides and recap very quickly our next steps so that I can get you out of here in the next 3 minutes. We're already beginning to lose people. So
Yes.
take it away,
Yeah,
Paul.
thank you very much for your time today. I know we tried to get through a lot of information. It was super helpful to hear those comments. Please feel free to get in touch with Callie or others on our team to share some of the feedback. But just to get everybody kind of moving throughout the rest of your day into lunch, this is, I just wanted to give you kind of an update of where we're going from here. As I mentioned, we're planning to wrap up by the end of March of next year. And so we do have 2 more meetings planned for this larger regional forum group. We're going to have a final presentation at the end of March. We're not exactly sure where that will be yet, but we do have that date set.
No, it's
for the
at
steering
Penta.
committee.
It's at Penta, Paul.
Oh, it is
Sorry.
at Penta. Okay.
Yeah, we've
Okay.
always had
We'll
it
do-
at Penta.
Okay.
The only reason there was a little question is it was a construction project, but they are ahead of schedule, so that's the only reason why. But everybody,
Okay.
please plan on Penta.
Penta. Okay, great. And then, but for the steering committee, we've got a meeting at the end of January. So again, that will be to review some of the governance and some of the funding options that we will be researching over the next couple of months. In terms of our immediate next steps, Callie, I just sort of added some of these in here, so feel free to add. But we will refine some of these transit and TDM strategies based on some of the comments that we got from you today. So thank you for that. We will be conducting another round of focus group meetings. So as we start to think about some of these specific issues related to some of the large employers, some of the education facilities here, medical, even some of the youth groups, not groups, but so the Gen Z, some of the younger folks in this region, we want to kind of drill down. And so we felt like some focus groups would be a good way to have those conversations, talk about some of these strategies and to help refine them. And then we'll be refining and developing the report. So we will actually have a report that will be on the website that will kind of be our digital stamp, and you will be able to visit that even well beyond the end of this study. Yeah, we'll just be preparing for the next steering committee meeting on the 28th of January. So with that, I really appreciate everybody's time. Callie or Sam Meldon, would you like to say anything at the very end here? We've got 1 minute.
Thanks to everybody. Really appreciate you all did it. 2 hours is a lot of time to think about this, but as you can see, there's a lot of complexity involved. So we really appreciate your engagement, and it's really kind of a privilege to be able to bring all these resources together on this issue. So thank you very much, and feel free, like Paul said, to reach out to me at any point if you know of connections that we should be making.
And we're going to end with the great applause that we're getting. Thank you, Callie. Thank you, everybody. And you are adjourned. Have a great day.